Jay-Z, what's up, man?
Nice to see you again.
We were talking
Um,
about language and how weird it is to do these kinds of things in a second language. And I have students all the time who I have to try to figure out, like, how do I grade this paper when I know that they're doing this? And in Switzerland, it can be like the third or fourth or fifth language or something like that. I'm
mhm.
like, how do you even think about how to evaluate a person? But it also creates many embarrassing situations the other way around when you're trying to learn a language, and also really funny situations. And one thing I was thinking about when we were talking about this is that we're watching the World Cup soccer, and one of the teams that's in the World Cup is the Ivory Coast. Do you care about soccer? Do you watch your World Cup?
Yeah,
Uh,
I've watched a few games.
so one of the teams that's in the World Cup is the Ivory Coast. And
Mhm.
there's this thing of where, like, if you speak a language and you use a word all the time, then you just think it's normal to use that word and you never think about what it sounds like. But if you're learning the word for the first time and you interpret it literally, it's really funny. And there's many German words like this. And one of them is ivory, which literally translated means elf leg. So a piece of
Mhm.
ivory on an elephant apparently looks like an elf leg, or maybe it was like elephant leg at some point. It was shortened.
Yeah,
But every
this is something we would have to look up in the or simply ask ChatGPT. But I have never
Yeah,
thought about this before. But
exactly.
never. Yeah, it's typical. If you are immersed into a language, you don't think about these questions, but learning a new language is a chance to discover things.
Dude, every time the announcer would say, because we're listening to it on Swiss TV, every time the announcer would say Elfbeinküste, and
Mhm.
I would hear, I would just imagine like little elves and their little legs running
Yeah.
around the soccer field. And I thought this is the funniest thing. But it's just a word. It means Ivory Coast. And also the word for tusk, which is like the actual thing, is like push tooth. So it's like a
Mhm.
right, like Stoßen sound or something like that. Isn't that what tusk? Isn't that how you say the piece on the elephant?
Stoßzahn.
Stoßen, yeah, which means like push tooth, doesn't it?
Yeah,
So,
it's true. It's true.
so like your push tooth
Yeah,
is
it's
made out
true.
of an elf leg.
Yeah, it's a special word to say that these are kind of things you can use to do things beyond eating.
Right.
You can
Yeah.
push things around.
For example, dig in the
Yeah.
dirt. I don't know exactly what elephants use those for, but hey, thanks for agreeing to do this. I've had a few of these now, and my idea was something like it would be fun to get videos of people talking about interpersonal stuff
Mm.
together. And wouldn't it have been really cool to have, like, Jerry Wiggins talking to Timothy Leary, or Bob Carson talking to Lorna Smith Benjamin, or so not to put myself or you or anybody else in those categories, but I thought it would be kind of fun. And so one thing I mentioned we might talk about was the first time we met. I think I'm right about this, that the first time we met was in Zurich, where I live now. Is that true?
No, I don't think so. But it was
Mm.
probably what it was the second time because the first time I would say was Philadelphia.
Oh,
The SITAR
yeah.
meeting in Philadelphia in 2010.
I remember
Um,
that.
yeah, and there were I think Daniel was there and Martin, for example. So several German-speaking guests. And then the next meeting was in Zurich, and yeah, and then there was this yeah, very nice meeting at the tower, at the university tower, and great dinner. Um, and it's funny to think about the fact that you are now back in Zurich. So it was like um, a view into your own future.
This tower is like is in the center of my university. So I go for
Mhm.
meetings in that building all the time. And for people who've not been in Zurich, the tower like looks over the city, looks over the lakes, looks over the Alps. So all I remember was, I mean, I'd never been in Switzerland before, never been in Zurich before. I thought at the time, who knows if I'll ever be back. And then of course there was wine and stuff, so I was starting to get a little buzz, and I just had this like peak moment of like, wow, I'm sitting on this thing. I think it was with Pam Sadler, looking over the city, And like this is incredible, this place. And now I just went swimming in that lake this morning, just got back. Now it's like I've lived like a 5 minute walk from that tower. So yeah, that was fun. But okay, so Philadelphia though. Yeah, why? This is one thing I've always wondered about. Like, why did you guys come to that? Because I mean, there's interpersonal stuff happening here, like the stuff that Jochen Gebauer does, and those guys, they're into agency and communion. There's like a community of people. And SITAR was small at the time. And then you, yeah, like you say, you, Daniel, Martin. I guess Martin had been doing stuff with Aaron maybe at that point, or I'm not sure. What made you guys, did you guys all decide ahead of time together? I guess you were working with Daniel. Did you guys agree that you should both come,
No,
or did you meet
I
there, or
think
what?
I also met Daniel at this
No
conference the first
kidding.
time.
So it's
So
coincidental.
for me, yes, for me personally, it was like a door opener of my academic career because I didn't know anybody there. I went there by my own. I um, made this in the last phase of my PhD, and I made the decision I wanted to meet all the people I was citing all the time. And looking back, this was the best decision of my academic career to go to this meeting. Yeah. So I think Daniel had different reasons. I think Daniel worked with Len Horowitz,
That's right.
2006 or seven. So
That's
he's,
right.
yeah. And also Martin has his own history. And my own history. So I did my internship in Heidelberg in 2004 or so with Manfred Cierpka. And there I learned about the OPD, the Operationalized Psychodynamic Diagnosis System. And then I did my diploma thesis in yeah in this department, and I worked on. I just looked back into the title. It was about the discrepancy of self and other perception within the OPD relationship axis. And when I yeah searched for the literature and the background of the OPD relationship axis, I discovered Leary's book in our university, and this was also mind blowing because I still think that this book, the interpersonal diagnosis of personality, captures everything that was relevant later on, and the structural model, but also yeah a strong empirical base. I think more than 5,000 patients were interviewed and investigated in this Kaiser Foundation project. So it was very impressive to see that in the 50s, there was everything there already. And yeah, this was very inspiring. And then I wrote my diploma thesis on this topic. And then I went on with my PhD also on the OPD relationship axis. And when I was almost finished, I decided to go to this conference. Yeah.
I see. Uh-huh. Yeah, Leary's book is amazing, dude. I have 3 copies of this book. One
Mm-hmm.
of them is a first edition, almost
Mm-hmm.
perfect condition that I
Mm-hmm.
have like locked in a safe. And it's my number one, like if things were on fire, once I got everything that can breathe out of my house, this would be the number one thing that I would say. Even before my guitars, I would save this book. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but that is an interesting thing about interpersonal theory in general, and that project in particular is like, I was reading Aaron Pincus's dissertation. Aiden sent it to me, I think, maybe 5 years ago. And he's like, dude, it's all in here.
Mm-hmm.
All the stuff that like the DSM-5 alternative model was dealing with, and all the stuff that the dynamic stuff that people are now because mostly because of ambulatory assessments and smartphones. People are doing these studies all the time and starting to wrestle with the self other perception kind of stuff that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's all in there, and it's all in Leary's book.
Yeah.
Someone was
Yeah.
at, I don't remember who told me this. Maybe Tom Whitaker, was at Jerry Wiggins. I don't know if it was his funeral, but it was like around the time that he died, they went to see and Jerry's house, and they saw Jerry's version of this book, Jerry's copy of this book, and apparently, like every page was dog-eared, and there was
Mm-hmm.
like notes, and there was like highlights and stuff, because interpersonal theory is kind of like all the ideas were there in the 50s, and then it like the world wasn't ready. So it kind of stayed this background kind of
Mhm.
thing, like this seed that was buried underneath the dirt. And there was kind of some people like SITAR people like you 15, 20 years ago who are kind of like, oh, that's kind of cool that there's this stuff. And now it's really starting to blossom in a way that's kind of ironic because SITAR has become less and less well attended
Yeah.
in this ironic way, in part because I think so many people throughout the world are now doing this stuff. You don't need a society of the 12 of us who
Yeah.
care about this. Many people now care about the stuff that was in Larry's book.
Yeah, this is a nice twist about this rather sad development, which has many reasons. One
Yeah,
reason for me personally is that I try to avoid these flights that I
yeah,
did 10 years ago, several times a year. But maybe this is true. The content and also the type of research questions are much more common and covered by other conferences. Um, yeah, but back to the Leary's book, I think what I found most interesting, of course, the cycle, the interpersonal circle, but there was also the transaction cycle already implicated somehow because he had this um, not structural model in a sense of fact analytic structure like the circle, but um, different levels and areas of personality. And in this model, he captured both the self and others, and he captured public communication and conscious communication, like self-reports, but also the symbolic level, and then also a very mysterious level of the
the
unexpressed,
hidden, yeah,
which cannot be measured directly, but only
uh-huh,
observed by omissions in other levels,
right,
and then also values. So I think he had 5 levels in this book, and then he
yeah,
can connect them. And this was what I was most interested in. How can we connect these different levels? And this is a kind of higher order variables that are created if you relate two variables with each other and compute like a similarity index. And then there are also many follow-up problems with different scores, similarity scores, and so on, that were not really uh, solved at that time.
right.
Um, but now we have about the methodological implications. I think we are now in a better position than in the
Yeah.
50s.
Yeah, people sort of think of that book, I think, as like the one that introduced the circle, which isn't totally true, but in some ways it's true. But really the focus of the book as he
Mm-hmm.
wrote it was about these levels. And
Yes.
you're right, it sets the stage for multi-method assessment. It sets the stage for
Mm-hmm.
multi-surface interpersonal assessment. The idea of coherence, like you're talking about, like
Yeah.
how similar are these things? And then some of the things are not really explored, especially the unexpressed is not really
Mm-hmm.
a thing that people talk about anymore. Although it is true. I mean, sometimes like, do you know this rep grid, this Kelly method? Do you know about this method? It's a thing where you say
Yeah.
like, you know this, you say, so give me 12 people that you know, and then take the first two and say how they're similar to each other but different than the third, and then you do that a bunch of different
Mm-hmm.
times. And at the end you have all these words like, and it's like tall versus short, old versus young, but there's also psychological terms like power, whatever. Sometimes you give it to people and it's like there's this place that they just won't go to, like warmth, for example. There's no warmth, affection, kindness, empathy anywhere in, it's just like
Mm-hmm.
not an organizing feature of the way that they think about their social world. So I don't know, maybe this will come back eventually. But yeah, I mean, I think we still
Mm-hmm.
have decades ahead of us testing the hypotheses that were in that book, even if we just talk about the levels of functioning. Um, it was
Yeah,
really
and
precedent.
also the principles of complementarity, reciprocity, and so they were also already present, and many general principles how to do research using this approach. Um, and of course measurement instruments and so on. So it was very stimulating and yeah. But still, the entry point for me personally was still OPD. And
Mhm.
in the OPD system, the relationship axis is often only like considered as a surface axis. So the deep stuff is going on elsewhere,
Right.
conflicts and structural
Right.
improvements and so on. But yeah, I really like um, the empirical and methodological connections of this relationship axis.
Yeah, so your training is kind of interesting because you focus a lot on clinically or at least clinical adjacent topics, but you don't, do you consider yourself a clinical psychologist or a methodologist or a personality psychologist or?
Mm, yeah, I think I'm a methodologist with some specific content interests, but I'm definitely not a clinical psychologist. I don't have this training. I For several years I worked in Kurt Bennecke's outpatient center doing interviews, OPD interviews, intake interviews. But yeah, now this is more than 10 years ago, and I never had a clinical training. So
Right.
yeah,
And yet you have this background, as you say, your entry point was kind of the OPD, so psychodynamic diagnosis. You've also done stuff on psychodynamic psychotherapy and other clinically personality disorder diagnosis in general. So there's a lot of clinical kind of
that's true.
topics in your, and I
Yeah,
think
but
you really,
it's difficult to, for me, it's really difficult to understand this because it's like I did this internship in 2004, maybe also because I didn't find another place. It was not very focused. And then I found something that I found interesting, and I tried to do good stuff, and it was recognized. And then doors open, and I went
Mhm.
on. So I'm not sure. I can try to make sense of it afterwards, but
Right.
somehow it's yeah. There's a lot of randomness in this path.
Yeah. I mean, I think for most of us, it's like, who knows what we end up studying, the stuff that we study. But part of this also has to do with the European or at least the German system. Because in the States, usually people, the most conventional standard path, or in North America, the most common path is like you finish your bachelor's and then you decide you want to apply for a PhD. And then there's this like cycle. So every year in whatever the spring, there's interviews. And so the applications are due like the end of the
Mm,
fall. So you have to then decide for yourself, okay, here's the 10 or 15 places I'm going to apply. And it feels at least like there's some purpose, like you have some agency, so you
mm,
apply to these places. If you get into one, then you go there, and it feels like, okay, I don't know. So for some people, it's probably
mm,
more on purpose than it is for others. Whereas in the German system, you just kind of wait for PhDs to be available at the time that you need one.
mm.
So there's not these cycles. And so, I mean, this happens on our end too. When we're trying to hire PhD students, we're like, okay, I just got a grant. I have to scramble around. Is there any postdocs? We're
Mhm,
emailing our friends. Anybody got a person who's about to finish their PhD so I can hire a postdoc? So does really feel a lot more like just whatever happens to be there at the time.
mhm.
And that's kind of, I guess, how it worked out for you in some ways and how you got into the OPD in Heidelberg.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But then you also worked with Cord and Kassel, and so there was also some kind of like
yeah.
um,
Um,
connective tissue.
yes, and I think Manfred Cierpka, my PhD supervisor, he was closely connected to Cord. And when Cord got his first professorship in Kassel as a psychoanalyst, which is a special situation in Germany,
Right.
then he recommended him that I could start as a postdoc with him because Manfred Zipka, and I'm really thankful for this taking care of me. He noticed that I was really more interested in methods, and he thought that if I would stay in a medical department, I would be like a slave, a method slave for the big shots. And pushing me into the psychological department was, yeah, I think it was very important for me because then this was valued on its own, and
Right.
I build a career on it. So and this was yeah, the way I moved to court, and then yeah, court. I think I met him years earlier at the SPR, Society for Psychotherapy Research meeting. And he was also very interested in OPD, but also in interpersonal processes. And his early papers, were fascinating because he was very interested in facial expression. So he was not so satisfied with self-reports of patients or therapists. He had video material, and these videos were painstakingly coded by students. And then he tried to predict therapy outcome from these interpersonal facial reactions. And one of his findings that were very prominent at that time was based on a small sample of panic disorder patients. And he found that the more smile and social smiles the therapists showed in the first session, the less optimal was the outcome of the therapy. So this was construed as a finding that too much positive, superficial positive affect and support from the side of the therapist, was kind of dysfunctional within a therapy session. And this is interesting because it shows that therapeutic relationships are somehow different than everyday relationships, where smiling is definitely a good indicator. But in this case, it is more complicated and also related to interpersonal processes was another project from Cord, where he analyzed OPD interviews and searched for correlates of the level of personality functioning within facial expressions of patients. And there he found, and I think this is also one of the most interesting findings when I think about Cord's research, that the level of negative affect in the face is unrelated to level of personality functioning. But if you also code the reference object of the negative affect, so is the person currently speaking about the whole self? Or is the person speaking about the interviewer? Or is the interviewer in a situation, the reference object? Then there is a clear correlation. So more negative affect related directly to the interviewer or to the whole self is an indicator of structural deficits. This is a very interesting specification. And this kind of research was very time consuming, and it was very, from a strategic point of view, it was not very wise, because you cannot publish 2 papers or 5 or 10 papers a year. You have to collect data and code data for years. And then finally, you write a paper that is underpowered, to be honest. So, but this was Cord's mission in the first half of his academic career: interpersonal processes within real situations like therapies or OPD interviews, and focusing on behavior and not on self-report.
This is so interesting. There was a time, it really brings something together for me about Cord, because there was a time that I gave a talk and he introduced me. And it was, I don't remember what it was about, but when he introduced me, he made a special mention. I'd recently published a paper called something like Being Real in Psychotherapy or something like this. And he called that paper out, and it wasn't published in a very good journal. It's a fine paper, but it had nothing to do with my talk. And I thought, oh, weird that he would like pull that out. But it really clicked for me. This is really a core interest for him of like, are you being a real authentic person as both a therapist? And you can imagine these panic people. Like if I'm going to a therapist for panic, I mean, the content of that interview is basically like, look, you're here to face your fears. I'm going to freak you out and let you get used to it. Whether it's a dynamic therapy or an exposure-based therapy, that's basically what treatment for panic is. So if I have an authority figure telling me, I'm going to freak you out on purpose, and they're smiling a lot, I'm like, I don't know. This seems like maybe you're sort of sadistic. I'm not sure if I'm into that. Oh yeah, that really, yeah. No, he was, I mean, in some ways, my way of thinking about him is similar to my way of thinking about you, in that I think there's a real core value of like solid scholarship, like quality over quantity. I mean, you're productive, certainly, But I think this is kind of like a core value for you too, of like, I want to take my time to do really good stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe this is something that we share, but I also see a difference because Cord was, at least in the second part of his academic career, also a person that is on mission.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so he really felt the need to do something for the psychoanalytic, psychodynamic therapy that he valued. So he was a fighter. He was in war somehow, and this also had some negative consequences for himself. So if you are
Hmm.
in war, you get injured, and yeah, and then you act like an injured man. And
Yeah.
so this is something where I clearly see very clear difference to me because
Yeah.
I'm definitely not on mission and like to stay friendly and neutral. Yeah, and I'm not. I think I don't have this identity issue. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was a really interesting time, his career, because I mean, there's specific changes in the German political and educational
Hmm.
system that have, I don't know if we want to go into detail about that, but there was a kind of like real threat to psychodynamic training in Germany at that stage of his career. And there was this kind of evidence-based psychotherapy
Yeah.
movement where there was like stacks and stacks of poorly powered CBT studies showing that something that was designed to work is better than something that was not designed to work. And that was treated as evidence, not only that CBT is better than control, but that it was better than dynamic therapy. And then the dynamic people were getting in their own way and not taking like actual data collection seriously. And also the
Yeah.
RCT in some ways, this
Yes.
against weightless control is kind of a stupid design and people didn't want to waste their time on stupid things. So, but at the end, it was like, well, there's a stack of these studies and this stack of these studies, so this one must be better, even though there's no direct comparisons. And when there are, they sort of tie. So I
Yeah.
can sort of see, I mean, a lot of people in that crowd, I think you and I are both in the dynamic listserv. A lot of people in that crowd have a similar kind of ideological attitude and sort of seem like they're at war. And I'm also not like that, but I can sort of see where he was coming from
Mm.
because it felt unfair, probably.
Yeah. And it's very sad that he is no longer with us. And one thing, um, what if he would have the chance to come back to work and um, yeah, get healthy again, then he wanted to do basic research as in the early days. So he wanted to do more research on um, emotional processes in psychotherapy and maybe also use the new tools we have now. So maybe now it's not necessary that you have 20 students code
Right.
minutes
Yeah,
of
yeah.
interviews. You can now do it automatically. You can use all the transcripts from hundreds of sessions and process them and use them for hypothesis testing and doing large scale research with intense data. So this is
Totally.
now possible. And it's said that he's no longer there to use this in his last phase. Yeah, because I know
Yeah.
that he was very interested to step back from the politics and go back to his earlier research agenda.
Yeah, it is a shame. You wonder what like Timothy Leary or Cord Bennecke could do with AI,
Yeah,
right? Like
absolutely.
it's a
Yeah,
cheat code for the kinds of stuff that they were interested in.
yeah, yeah. This is so crazy. These machines are they um, make things fast and faster. So, and they change the value of many things of cognitive work, um, but they are also tools for realizing megalomaniac research fantasies. And yeah,
Yeah.
now it's you don't need a large lab. You can
Right.
you can do it with your agents or with your
Yeah.
uh, AI support team.
Okay, so if we fast forward now, you're a full professor. In fact, you just are finishing up like a fairly serious battle with administration in your department.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
this is true.
getting back to some stuff that you want to do. And
Yeah, yeah, this is true.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I mean, how do you think at this stage? So I've been asking people like how you think about like what gets you up in the morning, what motivates you, because I think early in your career, you just want to get a job. So you want to establish yourself. Maybe some people are like, I want to see my name on stuff. I'm sort of vain or narcissistic about it. Other people are like, I like working with people. Other people are just curious about science. There's income, there's having a steady income. But at the mid-career stage, you've already got your name on plenty of stuff. You already get a chance to work with whomever you want. There's still probably scientific curiosity. But like when you think about now, if you know, and I'm not talking about administration and stuff that's kind of a burden, that's service. But like in terms of your research, like what do you think is really driving you?
Mm. Mm. Solving problems. This is so fulfilling. And I hope that if this burden is gone in October this year, then and I still feel that it's getting better. So I'm during the last months I've used increasingly Gemini Pro and Opus 4.8 and so on, and I tried what is possible with these tools and to solve problems that I find interesting. And this is really very fascinating. So especially for coding, for developing R pipelines, yeah, it's really a quality boost and a speed boost. And I am very much looking forward to solve many problems I find interesting during the next years. And the more complicated question is which kind of problems do I find interesting and how to make a decision and how to make a priority. And I think, yeah, this is something I want to improve and to grow, to make better priorities in the future. And yeah, but yeah, the most important thing is that um, I really I'm excited to use these new tools to solve problems that I'm thinking since many years about them. And one of these problem field is related to the units of description we use in personality science. And this is also one of the projects we are currently doing together to really have a close look to these language units that are embedded in many questionnaires. And this is something that can be tackled with AI in a way that was not possible a few years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also other things like I wanted to do an R package for the not social relations model, but the social accuracy model from Jeremy Bison's and extended
Mhm.
R package. I have a lot of code for this, but I want to optimize it and to put it into a package. And this is also something that will be much more reachable for me with this AI support.
Yeah. 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 The thing that we're doing together really goes back to Leary in a way, right? Because it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the standard way of making a questionnaire, like if you're making a questionnaire about, let's say, interpersonal dominance, you'd say, you sort of think to yourself, okay, what is dominance? It's like wanting to be in charge, being bossy, trying to control people. And you write some questions down, like feeling power, maybe, or
Mm-hmm.
thinking that you're better than other people, or
Mm-hmm.
and so you write some questions down, and maybe you think, oh, maybe there's a few factors in there. Maybe there's like the more autonomy part of that, and maybe there's the more like controlling part of that, and there's the more achievement part of that, or whatever. And so you say, well, maybe I'll write some items for this factor and this factor. And you kind of like, we know the game that you kind of like know that you're writing items for those factors in the first place. And implicit, this kind of goes back to Leary's concept of the unexpressed, is like you're also not writing items
Yeah.
on purpose. Maybe not even on purpose, maybe just because you're not thinking of them, or maybe because you're really trying to get your factors in the items writing stage. But you're always thinking about like the name of the scale, like the construct, and just like whatever is in that construct. And what you're not thinking usually about is like, well, some of these items are like about feelings. Some of these items are about how you think about things. Some are things about like what you want. Some of them are behavioral. Some of them are in reference to yourself, and others are in reference to other people. Some of them are more or less adaptive, more or less stable, etc. And so we've got all these questionnaires now, like big five questionnaires, for example, where there's like extroversion scales and they have different numbers of facets. And usually when you compare measures, you think about, well, how many facets are there? And is the facet content the same? And if they, to the extent that they don't correlate perfectly, we usually explain it at that level. But this other thing that you're interested in or that we're thinking about together could have a huge effect. Like if one person writes an extroversion scale full of items about how people think, and another person writes one full of items about how people behave, and a third person about how people feel, those things are not necessarily going to go together because a person can feel extroverted and not express that in behavior or in thought, etc. So I think this is a really, and there's been people who've done this in the past, and to the extent that you can kind of parse those things, it's really interesting because it really goes back to this Leary idea of like maybe the motivational level and the behavioral level don't match up in ways, particularly for a single person, that are really interesting, which is kind of like what multi-surface interpersonal assessment's all about.
Absolutely. So it's a task of purifying the the essence of all these questionnaires that are out there and separate all these different levels. So this is one way you can look at it, and I think it's very helpful also for process analysis, for if you want to solve questions about causality. Then it doesn't make sense to mix everything together and call it
Right.
a trait dimension, but it's makes sense to separate the description of the behavior from motivation, from capacity, that are potential explanations for individual differences. And so I think it's a nice project, and it can be also, yeah, it's like constructing a landscape of the published inventories from this specific level perspective in terms of Leary. Yeah, and for this, AI is a very great tool.
Yeah. Yeah. And once you get into the question of causality, then you have to work time into your thinking, which complicates things. Like it's one thing to parse item content, but now when you're talking about like do motives cause behaviors or thoughts mediate that or whatever, now
Mm,
you've got time in there. And I'm like, how much time does stuff take to happen? And now you've got a whole like, there's like a universe of much more complicated questions than anything we're dealing with if we're only living in a world where we correlate one questionnaire with another.
mm. Yeah, true. So the timing thing is the other really big um, yeah, complicating factor. And I think there is a paper from Mike Roach about complementarity at different levels, or about several people that maybe you have also written about this, but this was very illuminating to see that, yeah, the complementarity hypothesis has very different implications, whether you
Totally.
consider moment to moment behavior and the relations between two persons within a diet, or if you go to a cross situation dynamics, or if you even go to trait complementarity. This is completely different concepts, and also
Totally.
completely different consequences for relations to third variables like satisfaction or adaptation also. Yeah, so this is something that can no longer be ignored. And
Right. And that's still descriptive. And yet, I think, I mean, there's Mike's paper in which he said basically, like, in an ambulatory design, he asked people how complementary the momentary thing was during the interaction.
mhm,
And you can compare rates, like warmth complementarity is higher between situations and dominance complementarity is higher within situations, which makes a certain amount of sense. We have some data. I collected data as soon
mhm,
as I got here with my startup because I wanted to have both CADE, both momentary within interaction and
mhm,
between interaction ambulatory data. The ambulatory data got a little screwed up. We're working on this, but basically the punchline is that there's no relationship. That couples who are
mhm,
more complementary between situations are not the couples who are more complementary within situations. So we're really dealing like at a descriptive level with like pretty different
Mhm.
concepts, even though we use the same word to describe them. But to the earlier point, like that's still descriptive. We still don't know why people are complementary or like what's
Mhm.
happening, like causally, or why that relates to like relationship satisfaction or whatever.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, and when
yeah,
we come to explanation, or yeah, something I had in mind is another figure you mentioned in the beginning of our talk, Lorna Smith Benjamin. And there was
yeah,
one SITAR meeting where we visited her at her
yeah, in Utah.
veranda in Salt Lake City in the mountains,
Yeah,
because I think she had birthday or so. It was also a very special moment. But
totally.
when I read Leary, I also, of course, recognized that Lorna Smith Benjamin has developed like a therapy system, the interpersonal reconstructive therapy based on the system. And there were some people in Germany taking this up, also translating it. I
Oh yeah.
think Wolfgang Tress, person from psychosomatic research. Um, but it was not very well known. I think it's still not very well known. And I
Hmm.
think this model with the copy processes is also very fascinating stuff. And if you explain it to people, to lay people, they are often blown away because it makes so much sense.
Yeah, it's like
So
this. It
why
clicks.
I'm behaving this way? What is the implicit relation to my internal figure that I'm attached to? And also the possibility that I get pleasure out of acting in accordance to this internal figure. So her thesis was like, if I understood it correctly, people with especially personality disorders, they are more concerned about the internal figures they that are captured from earlier phases in their lives. They are more concerned with them and to please them than with the actual reality in their
Yep.
interaction partners. And there are these three copy processes I think very interesting to behave the same way as the mother did with you, if the mother is the internal model, or to act as if she was still present. So this is recapitulation. And then there's also introjection. So I treat myself the same way as my mother treated me. And very fascinating stuff. And there's almost no research on it
Yeah.
because it's so difficult to operationalize. And so I know there's one scholar from Lorna. How is his name? I forgot it. Maybe you know it.
Ken Critchfield.
Yeah, Critchfield, yes, yeah. Uh, but only a few papers. And yeah, I really think this is clinical, could be very useful
Hmm.
formalizations of processes like transference and countertransference and identification.
Totally. I talked to Ken. I did one of these videos with Ken last week,
Ah,
actually, and
I
he
have
was
to
talking
watch
about
it.
this.
Nice.
Yeah, no, he was talking about this stuff, and he actually has a similar. I asked him the same motivation question that I asked you, and he's got curiosity and many other things. But one of the things that he thought really deeply about this, and one of the things that he said was that he thinks Lorna was such a genius, and there's something really deeply
Mm,
meaningful and valid and slightly different about her approach relative to other treatments that he feels sort of similar to maybe the way Cord felt, that looked
hmm.
like is at war, but he's like, I really feel a responsibility
Yeah,
to promote IRT
yeah.
and to train people in this
Mm,
method. And he said something like, "Look, if it doesn't keep the same name, even if Lorna doesn't get credit for it, he thinks there's something that's so true about it
mhm,
that like it really should be like an organizing way for people to think about like what's happening in these gifts of
mm,
love, where you're more interacting with the person in your head than you are with the person
yes,
in your actual
yeah.
environment as a
So
kind of
this
marker of PD."
this could be something I want to do in the next 10 years or so. I do a project on this model and really collect a big data set that you can
That would be
test these
awesome.
processes in a more convincing way than it has been done. Because it always seemed to me that Ken Critchfield, um, he has not um, such many resources
It's
available to
hard.
do this research. So I think he has a
It's
smaller
so hard.
population. I'm not really sure about his position, but Lorna is, I'm not sure, is she still living? Yes.
She's still
But
living, but
she's more than
she's
80 years old or even 90. I
yeah,
don't.
and she's quite ill. She's got I think she's got dementia, and so
Okay.
she's not interacting
Yeah.
scientifically
Okay.
anymore for sure. Yeah, but
Okay.
yeah, so Monday you should talk to Ken about this. You're right. I mean, it's really, really hard to do. It's really, really hard. Like in a perfect world, you would have some kind of objective sense of what happened in those early relationships, which
Yeah.
is almost impossible to get. But even having
Mhm.
some way of capturing the internal representations in relation to the way the person acts now.
Mhm.
My dissertation was actually about this, and my advisor's always complaining that I never published it. But we did find that
Mhm.
people with borderline personality are actually more responsive to the situation. So we kind of found the opposite
Mhm.
effect. There's a kind of like sensitivity. If you're warm, I'll be super warm to the degree that I have higher borderline traits. So I think this whole like idea of when I'm interacting with you, how much is my behavior driven by stuff that's happening inside my experience, kind of independent of what's happening with you,
Mhm.
and how much is it like something that's happening between us? Is it really core kind of balancing? I know the mentalizing people talk about this, right? Like the self-other kind of focus
Mhm.
and how much, and if it gets out of balance either way, then it's kind of a sign of
Mhm.
maladaptivity.
Yeah, but also some basic personality psychologists. I recently saw a paper on situation construal versus situation selection. So, because also this theme is part of the very old transference concept from Sigmund
Sure.
Freud, where you and where the interpersonal um, yeah, perspective on this is that maybe there is no distortion. I am behaving in a way that make you do
Yeah.
exactly this, what I'm complaining you are doing. So, and this is the reason why we need some, yeah, experimental setup or objective data to contrast the perception with actual behavior, the different levels from Leary, to really understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Um,
So I gave you a homework assignment.
yeah.
And the homework assignment was to solve an interpersonal problem. I have pictures of like SASB or the interpersonal situation or the single surface circle if you'd like to use them. But the situation that I ask you to solve is this. You've got a close friend for a long time, but they've been increasingly distant, only sometimes return your texts or calls. They seem, even when you spend time together, they seem kind of like not as close anymore. You really want them to be friends. You want to improve the situation. How do you think about it? What do you do? And my first question is, do you want me to pull up one of these pictures to illustrate how you think about it? And if so, which one?
um, yeah, maybe the circle as a
Okay.
starting point. Yeah, I thought about this problem, and so before I would act, I would think, and I think two concepts might be relevant. So I would think about my own behavior first. So I would think about, could it be that my own behavior during the last month or encounters had some impact I haven't considered so far. So I think this um, um, would be within the interpersonal theory a consideration of possible discrepancy between what I have thought before or about my own behavior and the impact it could have be on him or her. So this would be something I would try to clarify. So is there any indication that I um, act cold-hearted if I look at the circle myself?
Mhm.
Was there any incidents that his or her withdrawal and um, like it's the behavior of the person that you described is like low dominance and low warmth. So so the introverted octant, yes, at least that how I would interpret it. And then one reason for this could be my own behavior, right? So
Mhm.
it's only a complementary response. So this would something I would think about, and then I would also think about motivation and possible ambivalence on his or her side and my own side. So you mentioned I value this friendship. And so my conscious motivation is definitely to repair it. But I can also think about possible ambivalence. Is there another motive? Maybe I also feel injured or devalued in some encounter. So this is something I could look at, and also I could think about motivations on the side of the other person. Why? What could have? Which motives could play a role? Okay, and after this clarification phase, I would say it would be important to not act in a complementary manner. So, like a dominant and hostile response would probably be the thing that would be expected from complementarity theory, but this would be definitely the reaction that would make things worse. So it would be very important to, be warmth and affiliative, and to be not too pushy. Yeah, so non-dominant but warmth. This would be maybe the spectrum of behavior that seems appropriate from interpersonal theory. And then I would use like a strategy like meta communication and try to mention the situation between us. So to make it explicit and say something like, of course, it has to be the appropriate situation. It's not easy, and the timing and context matters a lot. But if the optimal situation or the appropriate situation is there, then I would really mention it. I would say, I have the impression that you are act introverted, that you or I feel that I'm anxious about that you are no longer interested in or enjoying our meetings. What do you think about it? But maybe this is something I should do definitely in German and not in English.
Well, I just noticed how blurry my slide is, and I'm sorry about that. It wasn't blurry when I looked at the first one when it was small. But so you said, I mean, I think there's a really nice illustration of how you can use even just the simple circle, because you said four things, at least as I heard it. Two things about behavior and two things about motivation. The behavior is, well, the way they're behaving is here, and the complement is this. And so maybe without realizing it, you've been competitive or distant or dominant and somehow not noticing them or somehow rejecting. And is there anything in looking back that you've done behaviorally that would have triggered this response? Yes. But then second, motivationally, are you having feelings yourself about like maybe we're on a different page or whatever? And what are their motivations? And might it make some sense when you look back of like, no, now that I sort of sit in their shoes, I can sort of see where they might. And maybe you'll learn something important there. And that's the sort of reflective part before you talk to them. And then the other two things that you said had to do, okay, now that we're talking, the behavioral piece is, well, the one thing you wouldn't want to do is compliment their FG. You wouldn't want to be like, hey, what's wrong with you? I thought we were friends. Like, why are you like not responding to my text or whatever? Like, this is probably going to just make the problem worse. And so you would do the opposite. You basically said, do the anti-complimentary response, basically, of warm submission, and just behaviorally that ought to pull them more in the place that you're hoping, and you can kind of rebalance on the warm side of the circle. But also motivationally, the sort of meta communication piece is like, can we talk? And you're right, like it's not an easy thing for like adults to talk about often, but like, is something going on? Like, are things weird? Are you like preoccupied? Are you just busy, or like what's going on? To try to figure out why they might be acting this way. So that was a really nice demonstration. Okay, well, we're just about out of time here, JC. Thanks a lot for doing this.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to talk. And it's great to know that we'll meet in person in not so far future. Yeah, this is
the first Scotch in Scotland is on me. And yeah, say hi to the family for me, and be well, huh?
Yeah,
Till next
you
time.
too. You
Okay.
too.
Bye bye.